Hello and welcome to a new episode of Constructing Kingdoms with the Violet Howler, a literary analysis of the Kingdom Hearts story. Since this video will be going up the same month as Valentine's Day, I wanted to talk about the role that romance plays in Sora's journey. While the franchise places a significant deal of focus on the friendships between various major characters, this does not inherently prevent the series from ever depicting the development of romantic relationships. To insist otherwise dismisses the ways in which romance is already woven into the narrative. It also ignores the fact that so much of Sora's journey across the series has involved him directly or indirectly helping the canon Disney couples of each world he visits get together in the Kingdom Hearts universe. Not to mention the fact that a significant portion of all the foreshadowing used in each game is communicated through parallels between the Kingdom Hearts original characters and existing Disney couples. To say nothing of the fact that Sora himself openly questions what love is in response to seeing how some of those couples act with each other. So it is not only possible, but likely that after seeing and helping all these Disney pairings get together, that the series will at some point turn the tables and give some attention to Sora's feelings when it comes to romance. Because a story having other major themes is not mutually exclusive from showcasing the development of a romantic relationship. There are countless popular movies, shows, books, comics, and video games in which the development of, or conflict within, at least one romantic relationship plays a significant role in the narrative without being the singular main focus of the story at all times. And this is especially true for Disney and Square Enix. So the development of a romantic relationship in Kingdom Hearts canon is not incompatible with the series' focus on friendship. Especially because Kingdom Hearts is about more than just friendship. As a coming-of-age narrative, Kingdom Hearts delves into other themes like the question of what makes you a person, or what makes someone or something real. So there is enough room for exploration of different themes in the narrative that Kingdom Hearts can be about friendship and romance. And when a story explicitly acknowledges and calls attention to the protagonist's experiences with romance or lack thereof, you cannot simply ignore the topic in your analysis and expect to understand the full scope of the story, because that protagonist's ignorance of romance is part of the story. So with all of this in mind, it is not only worthwhile, but important to discuss and analyze what a story like Kingdom Hearts is building up to in regards to a potential romance for its main protagonist. So this month, I'll be breaking down how the framework of the heroine's journey, the consistency of comparisons to Disney romances, and the emphasis on balance between light and darkness communicate which character I believe is most likely to be Sora's endgame love interest. While there are many different interpretations of who Sora should end up with at the end of the series, it's commonly taken as a given that Sora and Kairi are the intended endgame romance. Most of the wider fanbase and general audience accept as fact the idea that Sora and Kairi will eventually end up together, with countless people even believing they're already a couple as of Kingdom Hearts 3. But despite that assumption, Sora and Kairi are not a couple as of the most recent events of the present-day storyline, and looking at the patterns within the overall narrative and how their bond is portrayed in the series, I find it unlikely that they ever will be. It is true that their dynamic on the surface of the original game had some fairy tale-like charm to it. She's the lost princess whisked away from her home at a young age, who gets kidnapped by dark forces and trapped in an eternal slumber, only awoken by an act of self-sacrifice from the heroic knight she's known since childhood. Sora even storms a castle and slays a dragon in order to reach her sleeping body. And then after he sacrifices himself to break her curse, she manages to pull him back from the brink of oblivion by holding tight to their bond and refusing to accept his demise as permanent. Not to mention the visual bookends of them both updating the cave drawing to show themselves each offering the other a Paopu fruit, something which the other kids during the tutorial insinuate is considered a romantic gesture on Destiny Islands. They even end the game with a dramatic goodbye in which Sora promises to come home to Kairi as the restoration of the islands pulls them apart. But when you look at the series as a whole, subsequent games have failed to build on that potential toward the expected conclusion. Instead, what Sora and Kairi's interactions across the series communicate, as I've discussed in previous videos, is the theme of childhood friends drifting apart as they get older. When they finally do share the Paopu fruit in Kingdom Hearts 3 like fans had been waiting 17 years for them to do, Kairi in the original Japanese version emphasizes the fruit being a good luck charm to keep her and Sora from being separated, which is in line with the fact that Birth by Sleep introduced a platonic interpretation of the legend, showing that the act of sharing the fruit is not inherently romantic. and there's nothing in any game content after that moment, or any interviews from the creators, that confirm that Sora and Kairi sharing the fruit was confirmation of romantic feelings like some fans insist it was. Instead, Sora's Japanese voice actor himself said that the actors had recorded an alternate version of the scene where Sora and Kairi didn't share the Paopu fruit, and that he didn't see the scene as being indicative of romance. And you'd think that if a scene was meant to be unquestionably romantic like some fans argue it was, that the voice actor who was specifically being directed on what emotions to convey in his performance wouldn't be questioning or denying that the scene was romantic. Not only that, but Sora and Kairi's Kinkstagram posts on the loading screens of the DLC show that the two of them had incompatibly different perspectives on what that moment meant to them. Kairi's post conveys exactly what she said in the base game, that this was a good luck charm to ensure that she and Sora were not separated again like they have been in previous titles. Sora's post, on the other hand, reiterates the exact same thing he said to her back in the first game when he left her behind to go back to Hollow Bastion for Riku.
Even if we're apart, we're not alone anymore, right?
These posts are an exact match in Japanese for Sora and Kairi's respective lines in each game. And this difference in perspective communicates that Sora and Kairi aren't even on the same page when it comes to their friendship, let alone any potential future romance. Kairi doesn't want to be physically separated from him at all, openly declaring near the end of Kingdom Hearts 2 her intention to spend every single day with him. But Sora has demonstrated on multiple occasions that when she's not in immediate danger, he's perfectly fine not spending time with her. Nor is he shown having any sense of urgency about fulfilling his promises to her, as seen with how his goal of finding Riku consistently takes priority over returning to her. Right after his dramatic promise to come back to her at the end of the first game, the next time we see Sora, he's calmly walking through the woods with Donald and Goofy, talking about how they have to find a way to get Riku and Mickey back. And then despite agreeing with her idea of spending every single day together, he and Riku get themselves trapped in the realm of darkness with seemingly no way out, never to see any of their friends ever again. And Sora acts completely casual about that. This even extends to Sora just communicating with Riku and Kairi. When Kingdom Hearts 3 gives all the good guys cell phones with interplanetary reception, we never once see Sora express a desire to use it to talk to Kairi in either the game or the novel adaptation, compared to how he repeatedly tries to text or call Riku and talk about his experiences. Some may point to moments in Kingdom Hearts 2 like when he imagines himself and Kairi dancing together in Halloween Town as proof of how much he misses her, yet not only does this scene only occur after he knows she's been kidnapped, but in the original Japanese, he only imagines himself and Kairi in place of Jack and Sally after Donald and Goofy make comparisons based on Jack and Sally's conversation, implying that this daydream sequence was prompted by Donald and Goofy's comments rather than Sora thinking about Kairi on his own. And on top of that, if he really missed her so badly, he had multiple chances to go see her before she got kidnapped by the organization. Once the trio got the gummy ship back, there was nothing preventing him from trying to stop by the islands for a quick visit before continuing his search for Riku. And if he'd let Kairi come with him, her capture could have even been prevented altogether. And when he finally does see her again, the first words out of his mouth when they're face to face at long last are to comment on how different she is now. And not in the sense that she's grown up, or stronger, or more mature. In Japanese, he says something similar to what he later says to Riku, telling Kairi that she's still the same person even though her face is different. He does express right afterwards that he's glad to see her, but there's not a word in their brief conversation about how much he missed her or how worried he was for her safety before the focus of the scene switches to his reunion with Riku. This contrasts with his reaction to realizing he's finally found Riku, where Sora leads with how long he's been searching and how worried he was for his best friend's safety. While Sora does express the sentiment with each of them that they are still the same people despite looking different from how he remembers, it's telling that this is the first thing he focuses on when he sees Kairi for the first time in over a year. Compared to how it's one of the last things he says to Riku during the cutscene, despite not seeing him for just as long, it shows just how much Sora was thrown off by the change in Kairi's appearance. Especially when you take into account that his prior reminiscing where he imagined himself dancing with her in Halloween Town featured Sora in his current appearance, while he imagined Kairi as her Kingdom Hearts 1 self. So the fact that her not looking the way he remembers her was something he felt the need to say to her first, before anything else, implies that he had built up a picture of her in his head during their time apart, and is taken aback when reality fails to match that mental image. And in addition, looking back at the original game, with or without the knowledge of later titles, reveals cracks in the foundation of that initial fairy tale setup. Within the first game, the dialogue from the other kids on Destiny Islands framed the whole idea of wanting to share a Paopu fruit with Kairi as something that Sora was pushed into via peer pressure and cultural assumptions. When Riku reminds Sora of the legend surrounding the Paopu fruit, he teases Sora at 2 different points in the conversation about the idea of Sora wanting to try one. His teasing, in the context of the next day, carries the implicit suggestion that Sora share one with Kairi. Then the following day, Selphie directly refers to that legend as romantic, and in a piece of optional dialogue tells Sora that if he doesn't try the Paopu fruit soon, then Riku will do it first. Following that, Riku suddenly injects the idea of sharing a Paopu fruit with Kairi into their competitions as a prize for winning their next race. All of which serves to build up the idea that sharing a Paopu fruit with Kairi, and therefore a relationship, is another thing for Sora and Riku to compete over. That Sora's interest in sharing the Paopu fruit with Kairi isn't because he necessarily wants to share it with her, but because he sees it as one more way to prove himself equal to Riku. The game's novel adaptation reinforces this, not only by highlighting how preoccupied Sora is over his feelings of inferiority to Riku during that period of the game, but by depicting his thought process while adding the Paopu carving to the drawing in the secret place as, if only there was something I could beat Riku at. The implication obviously being that that something is a romantic relationship with Kairi. Furthermore, while finding her is part of Sora's goal in the first game, it's his relationship with Riku falling apart that drives the emotional conflict. Because it's Riku feeling abandoned and replaced by Sora that drives him down the path to darkness, while Sora's desire to reach his best friend both physically and emotionally is what ultimately drives him over the course of the game. When he goes to Hollow Bastion for the first time, it's specifically to chase after Riku when he departs from Neverland. Then as soon as Kairi is safe, once Sora has seemingly won the game's love triangle, he almost immediately turns around to go and save his best friend turned rival. Then, rather than return home to a fairy tale happy ending with Kairi on the islands, as soon as he seals the door to Kingdom Hearts, he immediately sets his goal toward finding a way to get Riku out of there. And as the series goes on, we're shown that Sora's acts of self-sacrifice are things he does for all his friends, rather than something exclusive to Kairi, and so are not definitive proof of romantic feelings for her like some fans claim. On top of all of this, while there are a few individual examples of parallels involving romantic couples, most of the Disney parallels concerning Kairi and her interactions with Sora involve parallels to platonic relationships. And there is a particular pattern in the choice of visual and narrative parallels, with the themes of Kairi's arc and role being reflected by characters that are predominantly associated with childhood. Which makes sense when you take into account what I described in my previous episode about how Kairi's fear of change in the context of a coming-of-age story traps her within a state of perpetual childhood that she cannot grow out of until she overcomes that fear. On top of all of this, Sora and Kairi's relationship just doesn't fit with the themes of the series. With what I mentioned in previous episodes about how the relationships in many stories emphasize and highlight the themes of the narrative, the endgame romances of Kingdom Hearts should therefore be ones that reflect the importance of light and darkness being able to peacefully coexist in balance. Yet Sora and Kairi do not reflect that balance. Despite his obvious inner darkness with rage and anti-forms, Sora is still associated primarily with light, being referred to on many occasions by Organization 13 as the Hero of Light. And as a Princess of Heart, Kairi's heart is entirely light with no darkness to speak of whatsoever. As a result, their dynamic is only associated with light, and their team attack in Remind, One Heart, utilizes an exclusively light-based moveset. So despite the initial potential, all of these details indicate a lack of narrative support for an endgame romance between Sora and Kairi. And I say this as someone who used to ship them when I first started playing the games back in 2007. Despite the issues with how she's been depicted in the games, I still like Kairi. She has an important role in the story and Sora clearly cares about her as a friend. But while some details, like her desire to spend all her time with him and the fact that she cut her hair in Kingdom Hearts 3 based on what she thought he might like, suggest that Kairi has romantic feelings for Sora, I'm no longer convinced that he reciprocates those feelings. Some will defend this lack of on-screen development for the relationship as nothing more than the result of series director Tetsuya Nomura not knowing how to write romance properly, but this argument relies on the unconfirmed assumption that Sora and Kairi are indeed the intended endgame romance of the series. Because Nomura and the other writers have had 2 decades now to either officially pair Sora and Kairi up, or else give something in the games, interviews, or other material that definitively states beyond any shadow of a doubt that they plan to take the story in that direction. But they have not done any of that. Instead, I looked through 20 years worth of interviews with the writers and developers and couldn't find a single one where they even acknowledge how Sora feels when it comes to romance, or who he wants to have a relationship with. Meanwhile, in the actual story, the only thing we've gotten concerning Sora and romance is that despite being surrounded by classic Disney couples, Sora still doesn't understand what love is, and struggles to apply what he sees with these pairings to his own experiences. From a writing standpoint, there is no logical reason to do this if the plan is to have him get together with the girl everyone assumed he'd end up with all along. There are only two possible reasons to have your main character struggle with applying what they learned about romance to their own experiences like that. Either the struggle leads the main character to realize that they aren't interested in romantic relationships with anyone, or the struggle comes from the fact that their only exposure to romantic relationships has been couples of opposite genders, unable to recognize their attraction to someone of the same gender for what it is because they aren't even aware that's an option. In the interest of being concise, this video will be referring to such identities and related experiences using the word queer. Getting back to my previous comment, the inability to recognize same-gender attraction due to being ignorant that it's even possible is something that happens to plenty of queer people in real life, myself included. As a bisexual man, there were a lot of guys in my middle and high school classes that in hindsight I was obviously attracted to and had crushes on, but I didn't recognize those feelings for what they really were until I was in college, because the only romance I'd been exposed to as a child through both the people around me and the media I consumed had always been between a boy and a girl. By the time I learned in high school that being attracted to other guys was even possible, I had already internalized the expectation that my experiences with romance were supposed to resemble what I'd grown up with. And the possibility that Sora is going through a similar experience is why it feels so purposeful that the story thus far has aligned this closely with the framework of the heroine's journey. Because the conflict of her formula is driven by the protagonist trying to conform to traits that society values in pursuit of external validation at the cost of neglecting traits that society is either neutral or hostile toward, Murdoch's version of the heroine's journey intrinsically carries an element of social commentary. So when it comes to romance within a heroine's journey, the experiences of the main character should logically challenge the audience's biases and preconceptions about what they consider to be the ideal romantic relationship for people who are part of the same demographic as the protagonist. Which typically results in the Animus, as a figure whose presence and interactions help facilitate the main character learning to embrace the traits they've neglected, pulling double duty as the main love interest, with the resolution of the romantic tension being used as a symbol of that self-acceptance and internal balance. None of which works with Sora and Kairi because not only does Kairi lack the traits associated with the role of the Animus, but a significant portion of the audience already takes it as a given that they'll end up together no matter what. There are no preconceptions that a relationship between them would challenge. But many of the experiences faced by queer people stem from a deviation against the entrenched heteronormative default expectations that society still has of how men and women are expected to act, just like with Murdoch's patients. Which makes the heroine's journey easily applicable to stories about queer people of any gender, even if we aren't the demographic these authors originally had in mind when crafting their heroine's journey templates. So it is both logical and fitting that a story which follows the heroine's journey with a male protagonist would pass up the standard hero saves the girl and settles down to live happily ever after romance for one that is far less common in these kinds of action and adventure games. Because not only does Riku fill the role of the Animus, as previously discussed in my heroine's journey video, but his and Sora's experiences navigating their relationship across the narrative are similar to experiences common among queer people. Over the years, I've seen several people in the queer community describe how being unaware of their own sexual orientation left them unable to tell the difference between being jealous of someone because they wanted to be the other person, and being jealous because they were in love with them. During their heart-to-heart at the end of Kingdom Hearts 2, Sora and Riku each say that they were jealous of each other and wanted to be more like the other. But while Riku does wish he could emulate Sora and live more freely, his actions in the previous game demonstrate that his jealousy also stemmed from wanting Sora's attention all for himself, feeling replaced and abandoned when Sora made other friends. Meanwhile, though part of Sora's jealousy stemmed from feeling inferior to Riku and the drive to compete with him, on a deeper level Sora ultimately wants to be equal to Riku and stand by his side, an attitude he's held since they were young children. And that is not the only way that Sora and Riku's story has spoken to the experiences of queer fans around the world. Riku's journey of learning to accept his own darkness as a natural part of himself that can be experienced in positive ways is similar to how lots of queer people grow up being taught that same-gender attraction is something unnatural and sinful, but eventually manage to unlearn that mindset and realize that there's nothing wrong with them. Because listen to how Riku's story in the first 2 titles sounds when you take out any mention of magic or darkness or any other fantasy elements. And just a heads up, this is going to get a little heavy for a brief moment in about a minute or two, with quick references to sexual assault, predators, and associated trauma. The references are vague, but I wanted to give a warning just in case. To return to our current topic, we begin with a teenager who longs to leave his small town because he feels trapped and confined, jealous of his 2 friends who seem to be spending more and more time together without him. When he finally leaves home, he finds himself among people who do not adhere to what society has told him is normal and good. They help him recognize the same traits in himself that set them apart from normal society, and they encourage him to embrace their lifestyle. But at the same time, they warn him to be careful and avoid getting himself in trouble. Frustrated and angry because he believes that his closest friend has rejected and replaced him, he disregards the warnings and advice that he was given by the people who took him in. His carelessness and impulsiveness result in him being taken advantage of by a much older man who wants him for his body. And the pain of that experience drives him to reject everything about this lifestyle he had discovered. He decides that the trait which made them all different should not exist, and that if he can't get rid of that trait within himself, then he should die. On this journey, he meets more older men who have that trait and who encourage him to stop being afraid of it, but he doesn't trust them because just like the other man, they all want to use him and his body for themselves. Only when 2 people he trusts tell him that it's okay to have that trait does he begin to accept and embrace it as a natural part of who he is and that he's not broken for having it. When viewed from the perspective of darkness being a metaphor for homosexuality, Riku's story sounds like the tale of a gay teenager ashamed of their orientation after discovering it under painful and unpleasant circumstances, but gradually letting go of that internalized self-hatred and learning to accept that part of themselves through the support of people they trust. Meanwhile, Sora has another short story in the character files that aligns with an experience that's fairly common among queer people. In the section focused on Arendelle, Sora reflects on the bond between Elsa and Anna, and wonders whether his relationship with Riku is how siblings are. With how easily Sora describes Goofy as sounding like an older brother figure earlier in the book, Sora wouldn't be questioning whether that label fit if he truly saw Riku as a sibling. But what makes Sora's confusion over whether siblings is an accurate label for his and Riku's relationship even more significant is how it plays into another experience common among queer people. Many queer people have described how they used to default to sibling labels for their crushes on same-gender peers when they were younger before they learned that being attracted to someone of the same gender was even an option. Because without the knowledge that it was even possible for their feelings to be romantic, sibling bonds were the only frame of reference they had for describing feelings about a person of the same gender that were different from friendship. And Riku's story in the character files implies that he has undergone a similar struggle to define his relationship with Sora. He expresses that he tried to act like an older brother figure to Sora when they were younger, but his word choice and the fact that he questions when he stopped indicates that in hindsight he realized that this description of their relationship was never accurate. And the fact that he at one point even tried to use a different label at all than best friend to define his bond with Sora suggests that neither type of relationship was able to fully encompass how he felt. So if Kingdom Hearts continues to follow the outline of the heroine's journey, the patterns of how romances in heroine's journey narratives are portrayed, along with the resemblance that Sora and Riku's experiences have with those that are common among the queer community, leave Riku as the character with the most narrative support for being Sora's love interest. But even if I'm wrong about the narrative following the heroine's journey structure, one of the main things that still convinces me Sora and Riku are the main romance of the story is how consistently the series draws parallels between their bond and existing Disney romances. While the series does sometimes use platonic relationships as parallels to Sora and Riku's bond, most of the platonic parallels are limited in scope to individual games and associated tie-ins, while many of the romantic parallels consistently carry over across multiple titles. Kingdom Hearts 3 directly compares Hercules diving into the River Styx to save Megara's soul, with Riku sacrificing himself for Sora at the Keyblade Graveyard before the time reset through the use of the Japanese phrase Taisetsu na Hito. Taisetsu na Hito is a highly sentimental term that describes a person one cares for deeply, like a family member, romantic partner, or very close friend, for example. When translated or localized into English, it can be worded many different ways to express the same sentiment, such as, they mean a lot to me, I treasure them, they're special to me, loved one, etc. For simplicity, I'll be using precious person whenever I refer to the phrase Taisetsu Nahito. Sora's journey in Kingdom Hearts 3 begins when he seeks out Hercules for advice after losing his power in Dream Drop Distance, referencing how Hercules in Kingdom Hearts 2 lost his strength and his will to keep fighting after the Colosseum was destroyed. When recalling those events, Hercules describes that what allowed him to get his strength back and regain his will to keep going was wanting to save Meg with all his heart. And at the end of Sora's visit, in Japanese he talks about how he doesn't stay on Olympus with his birth family because life without his precious person would be empty. This references the ending of his original movie, where Hercules chose a mortal life on Earth with Meg over an immortal life on Olympus with his birth family, communicating that she is the precious person he's referring to. Then immediately after the events of Olympus in Kingdom Hearts 3, we cut to Mickey and Riku searching for Aqua in the Realm of Darkness. Riku describes how, in contrast to his previous visit to the Dark Realm, not only does he not feel afraid, but he even feels exhilarated. Feelings which he immediately clarifies have nothing to do with his powers over darkness. Mickey specifically identifies that this feeling is because Riku has found the strength to protect his precious person, explaining that sometimes you care about someone so much that all other feelings disappear, leaving no room for fear or doubt. And what happens when Riku decides to sacrifice himself for Sora in the Keyblade Graveyard? All the noise fades away. There's no background music, the roar of the Demon Tide reduces to a soft rumble. The only clear sound is Riku taking a deep breath as he prepares to give his all to protect his best friend. This callback to Mickey's words communicates that Riku's precious person is none other than Sora himself. Which makes me forever salty that the English localization translated Herc's use of Taisetsu Nahito as person I love most, and Mickey's as what matters. Anyway, the Hercules parallels even go back to Kingdom Hearts 2, where the game deviates from the movie by having Meg actively attempt to help Hercules against Hades in secret, like how Riku hides from Sora for most of the game while helping anonymously from the shadows. The game also draws a visual parallel between Meg carrying Hercules when he gives up in the face of the Hydra destroying the Colosseum, and Sora carrying Riku after the latter collapses following their defeat of Xemnas and his nobodies during the game's finale. And there are many more Disney couple parallels where that came from. I previously described in my episode on microcosm to macrocosm foreshadowing how Ariel's fear of Eric rejecting her because she wasn't human paralleled Riku's fear that Sora would reject him for looking like Xehanort's Heartless. But Dream Drop Distance also has Ursula appear in her giant form as the catalyst for Sora and Riku being separated for their Mark of Mastery test, much like how she separated Ariel and Eric during the final confrontation of the Little Mermaid, as well as the fourth visit to Atlantica in Kingdom Hearts 2. Sora even comments on this in the character files about how Ursula was an obstacle to Ariel and Eric's relationship, then immediately questions why she attacked him and Riku in the Realm of Sleep. At the end of his last visit to the Land of Dragons in Kingdom Hearts 2, Sora cries when he sees Mulan and Shang getting the opportunity to fight by each other's side as the Emperor's bodyguards. In the novel adaptation of this scene, Sora's internal dialogue as he outwardly tries to deny the fact that he's crying was about how much he wanted to see Riku again. Which can be inferred in the game from the fact that the entire plot of his second visit to that world dealt with Sora encountering Riku for the first time since the original game and trying to chase after him. And the Emperor's words when he offers Mulan the job about how two reeds together are stronger than one bring to mind a sentiment that Sora and Riku each expressed throughout Kingdom Hearts 1, that the two of them could do anything as long as they were together. Goofy expresses a similar sentiment in later titles, with him saying in Dream Drop Distance that Sora will be fine as long as Riku's with him. Then in Kingdom Hearts 3, Goofy says the exact same thing about Rapunzel and Eugene on return visits to the Kingdom of Corona. And like I discussed in my Norse mythology video, the entire plot of Dream Drop Distance was a giant parallel to the story of Sleeping Beauty, with Sora and Riku as Aurora and Philip, while young Xehanort took the role of Maleficent. There's also the parallels between the Beast fearing Belle's rejection after his actions under Xaldin's influence in Kingdom Hearts 2, and Riku fearing Sora's rejection for his actions in the original game. Which are reinforced by the fact that on Sora's second visit to Beast Castle, the wardrobe uses the exact same term in Japanese to refer to the Beast that the Emperor uses to refer to Riku near the end of Sora's second visit to the Land of Dragons. And just like how Kingdom Hearts 3 communicates through Hercules and Megara that Sora is Riku's precious person, Chain of Memories communicates that Riku is Sora's using additional parallels to Beauty and the Beast, as well as other characters such as Aladdin and Jasmine. The game establishes in the card recreation of Traverse Town that all the worlds visited from previous games and the characters encountered therein are created from Sora's memories and deeply affected by his heart. So all of the themes and lessons showcased on each floor except the 13th can be understood to reflect Sora's heart trying to communicate with him. and at least 2 of the recreated worlds that Sora visits center around the theme of overcoming trials to be with one's precious person. Aladdin wants to spend time with Jasmine, but the 2 of them are kept apart by their different social classes, leading him to follow Jafar's order to seek out the lamp because the Vizier promised to let him meet with her. When Sora suggests using a wish to make it so that he can see Jasmine anytime he wants, Genie responds with a proposal to grant that wish by making Aladdin a prince, thereby putting him and Jasmine on equal footing. Over the course of that floor, Aladdin fights through many obstacles in order to meet with Jasmine, just like Sora is fighting through Castle Oblivion to see Riku. Aladdin's angst over his lower status resembles how Sora feels inferior to Riku, with Aladdin's desire to improve his standing and approach Jasmine as an equal reflecting Sora's desire to prove himself as Riku's equal. Aladdin even directly acknowledges in Japanese that Sora is trying to find his precious person, just like how he wants to spend time with Jasmine, who Aladdin specifically identifies as his own precious person in the same scene. And by that point in the game, Sora was still traveling through Castle Oblivion with the stated goal of finding Riku, having yet to learn that his quote-unquote forgotten friend Naminé was trapped in the castle. Then halfway through the game, Sora encounters a version of Riku who is suddenly hostile and antagonistic toward him, despite them parting on somewhat positive terms at the end of the previous title. Later on, in the card version of Hollow Bastion, Sora witnesses the Beast experience the same cold rejection from Belle that he's experiencing with who he thinks is Riku. Yet prior to the reveal that the Riku he faced was a clone, Sora consistently refused to accept that Riku's rejection and hostility were his true feelings. Much like how Belle's coldness toward the Beast is revealed to be an act to protect him from Maleficent, Sora blamed Riku's behavior on external causes like mind control or memory loss. And just like how the Beast remains determined to save Belle from Maleficent even as she rejects him, Sora never gives up on trying to help who he thinks is Riku, because both he and the Beast greatly cherish their memories of their respective precious person. Even if players miss the parallels to established Disney couples, the Japanese dialogue in the opening chapters of the game all but directly state that Riku is Sora's most precious person. When talking to Sora about the person he's looking for and demonstrating how his heart affects the card worlds, Aerith directly refers to Riku as a precious person of Sora's. And Sora specifically proceeds through Castle Oblivion because he's been told he'll meet someone precious to him after entering the castle in the first place out of the belief that he'll find Riku inside. But the parallels that Sora and Riku have with these 2 Disney couples in Chain of Memories are ultimately building on connections that were already there in Kingdom Hearts 1. The parallel between Aladdin's feelings of inferiority because he isn't royalty like Jasmine, and Sora's feelings of inferiority because he's not as physically strong as Riku, is also present in the original game. And it's reinforced through the similarities between Aladdin calling out for Jasmine as the Cave of Wonders collapses after the keyhole is sealed, and Sora calling out for Riku as Monstro's stomach erupts following the defeat of the Parasite Cage. Meanwhile, Hollow Bastion presents a visual connection between Sora chasing after Riku and the Beast searching for Belle. Right before Sora takes the Keyblade back from Riku, he and Beast suddenly encounter an illusion of Belle that immediately transforms into a Shadow Heartless. On the surface, this seems entirely random and is only there as an excuse to split off the Beast so that Sora can have his big moment of facing Riku alone. But immediately after that moment, Riku suddenly transforms his clothes into a dark muscle suit as a visual representation of his growing dark powers. And when you slow Riku's transformation down and look at them side by side, both involve the character being encircled by thin wisps of dark smoke that spiral upward to reveal the new look. The connection to Belle and the Beast also lays the groundwork for an important thematic thread that the series has set up in regards to the development of Sora and Riku's relationship. In Kingdom Hearts 1, the Beast managed to achieve travel between worlds solely by believing he would find Belle again after Maleficent kidnapped her. During Sora's confusion over what love is in the character files, he reflects on that explanation and postulates that the ability to believe is a form of love. And as I've previously mentioned in my earlier episodes, a major narrative thread in Kingdom Hearts 3 was Riku expressing his belief in Sora, to the point where even the loading screens go out of their way to reiterate it. Meanwhile, multiple games have showcased Sora's belief in Riku. From his insistence in the final act of the first game that even at his lowest, Riku wasn't beyond saving, to his confidence in Dream Drop Distance that Riku would be able to easily pass their Mark of Mastery test. And that idea of love being connected to belief is reinforced by a series of narrative breadcrumbs planted throughout the first Disney worlds in Birth by Sleep. In Enchanted Dominion, Ventus and the 3 good fairies discuss Aurora's memory of meeting Philip that they witness once they free her heart from Maleficent's castle. Flora tells Ven that dreams are very strong beliefs, and explains that Aurora's dream led her to her true love, Prince Philip, referencing the song Once Upon a Dream from the original movie. And after helping reunite Cinderella with her prince at the Castle of Dreams, Aqua tells the fairy godmother that she was taught by Eraqus that darkness needed to be destroyed. Based on the fairy godmother's warning that it was dangerous to fight darkness with light, Aqua asks what she should do instead, and the fairy godmother responds by telling her that to find the answer she should experience more things and trust in her dreams. The fact that the two women are having this conversation while watching the main couple of the world's story get together draws a connection in the narrative between the topic of trusting your dreams and Cinderella's happily ever after marrying the prince at the end of her movie. Something which is further underlined when you consider the fact that said wedding occurred over a reprise of the song A Dream is a Wish Your Heart Makes, with lyrics about how your dream will come true if you keep believing.
No matter how your heart is dreaming, if you keep on believing, the dream that you wish will come true.
And it also calls back to Terra's chronologically earlier conversation with the fairy godmother about how, while working to make your dreams come true is important, sometimes believing your dreams are possible is a challenge enough on its own. And then upon Aqua's arrival in the Dwarf Woodlands, the seven dwarves explain how Snow White told them about falling in love and the prince she met. This is a reference to the song Someday My Prince Will Come from the original 1937 movie, where she sings about how one day she'll meet her prince again and the two will be married, associating this at the end of her song with dreams coming true. And when Aqua finally meets the prince herself, he tells her about how he and Snow White were brought together by a song, referencing the songs I'm Wishing and One Song from the beginning of the movie. So Birth by Sleep draws a connection between dreams, belief, wishes, and romantic happily ever afters. And then Kingdom Hearts 3's Limit Cut DLC ended with the fairy godmother telling Riku that his dreams hold the key to finding Sora, while Riku's Kingstagram loading screen talking about his belief in Sora ends with the hashtag #wish. Both of which combine to frame Riku's search for Sora as a mirror of these classic fairy tale princesses and how their dreams lead them to their one true love. Meanwhile, the image of two lovers brought together by music that Snow White's prince introduces in Dwarf Woodlands sets up a parallel that pays off later in Dream Drop Distance, where Sora and Riku must solve the problems of the Fantasia world by collecting pieces of musical score that can only be completed by each of the pieces they gathered individually being brought together. And where that musical score canonically produces the series' recurring theme music which plays on the opening menu of every single game of the series. Which is canonically identified by Mickey as a representation of the bond between Sora and Riku's hearts, and which is officially named on all soundtracks as Dearly Beloved, a phrase which many audiences are likely to be familiar with from hearing it recited at weddings as part of the beginning of the main ceremony.
Dearly beloved, we be gathered here today. Today, the kisses of a mask, you foxy cur.
And beyond all of these connections to established Disney romances, a romantic relationship between Sora and Riku makes sense with the series' theme of balance. Because unlike Sora and Kairi, Sora and Riku's relationship does emphasize their narrative connection to both forces. Chain of Memories has the organization directly refer to them both as the Hero of Light and Hero of Darkness, respectively. Their combination attack in Kingdom Hearts 2, Eternal Session, incorporates both light and darkness into their moveset. Meanwhile, their reality shift attacks in The World That Never Was in Dream Drop Distance involve them creating a multicolored Keyblade with a dark half held by Riku and a light half wielded by Sora, which gets openly used in cutscenes when Sora arrives in the Realm of Darkness in Kingdom Hearts 3. And that association of light and darkness goes both ways, with Sora being shown through Rage Form and Anti-Form to have a strong inner darkness that he has yet to acknowledge or address, while the light in Riku's heart is powerful enough to be visible from space when he was only 5 years old. So when you take into account the themes of the series, the consistency with which their bond is paralleled with Disney romances, and the history of the narrative structure that the story so far has been following, it does leave Riku as the only possible love interest for Sora that fits with the current narrative setup thus far.
Because Sora ending up with Kairi at the end of the series, or even ending up with both in a poly relationship like some people want, just can't happen without some major character development for Kairi, including giving her her own struggle with darkness. And with the series rapidly approaching the end of the heroine's journey formula, the writers would either have to cram all of that into a very short period of time, or else completely abandon the pattern that the series has been following so far altogether.
Not to mention doing a complete 180 on the childhood friends drifting apart as they get older theme that the writers have been doing with Sora and Kairi.
So based on the themes, Disney references, and narrative structure, it really is looking like it's going to be Soriku Endgame or nothing when it comes to Sora's love life.
And despite what some may argue, Disney as a company is not the insurmountable obstacle to a romantic relationship between Sora and Riku that they would have been in years past. Something best demonstrated by 1, the number of openly non-straight characters and relationships that have been depicted in Disney-owned properties within just the last 5 years, and 2, the downright maniacal stubbornness that allows series creator Tetsuya Nomura to be able to essentially tell Disney, we do it my way or we don't do it at all, on at least 2 different occasions in the last 20 years, and succeed in getting his way.
Ultimately, the details I've discussed today are only a fraction of the elements that provide narrative support for an endgame romance between Sora and Riku.
And the sheer amount of material and detail from 20 years of games and supplemental material is far more than I could ever hope to cover in any significant detail without making this video at least triple its current length. So for the sake of not extending this video by several hours, I'm going to hold off on detailed explanations of those other elements in my analysis videos for a later date.
Thank you so much for watching. If you're interested in seeing more of my literary dissection of the Kingdom Hearts story, feel free to hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you back here again on March 26th for my next video.